to Human Rights Asia Weekly Roundup. I am Ansar Stianes. With the end of direct military rule in Burma, human rights defenders are today able to celebrate Human Rights Day openly. For over 2 decades, this day was marked in secret, away from the brutal crackdowns of the military rulers. But Burma is one of only a handful of positive changes amongst worsening human rights records in many other Asian countries. In today's program, we will observe Human Rights Day by touching on some of the issues that the AHRC has focused on over the last year. The new government in Burma has promised the international community that they will release all political prisoners, to end the civil war, and to continue the peace process with dialogue. With us in the studio, we have Burmese human rights defender Min Lwin. Welcome to the AHRC.
Yeah, thank you.
How does it feel that you are now able to celebrate Human Rights Day openly in Burma?
Yeah, last 2 decades ago, and then we cannot have openly in Human Rights Day in Burma, and then but we make some ceremony. It held secretly in some of the society around the Burmese people and human rights activists. This year, Burma Human Rights Day will have openly, and we're happy to hear like this.
What is the situation of human rights in Burma today compared to the past?
Oh yeah, it's first I would like to say new government, it's nearly 3 years, and then so many amnesty order will coming out, so many political prisoners released. AHRC also welcome this message. And then new government and president, he promised end of this year all of the political prisoners will release, and then so this is a good thing. And other thing is about the child soldier, and then last 20 years they refuse no child soldier in Burmese army. Now they accept 175 children, child soldier return to the parents. It's a welcome message for human rights. Yeah.
So in your opinion, what are the most urgent human rights issues in Burma today?
Oh yeah, now in Burma today, we need some new government need to achieve 3 basic freedom: freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, and also freedom of association. This is urgent we need. And then because of 2008 Constitution gave a lot of rights, citizen rights and legal rights, so many rights, so on. But practically, we cannot get some of the rights. Yeah, it's now urgent we need.
The Indian criminal justice mechanism is an excellent example of the wide gap that exists in many Asian countries between the law protecting human rights and its practice. The Indian constitution has elaborate mechanisms for protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Despite so many legal guarantees of protection, life remains vulnerable, especially in areas where special security laws are enforced, permitting excessive use of lethal force. In Manipur in northeast India, police and armed forces often commit arbitrary killings in the name of ensuring national security. Left behind are thousands of widows and fatherless children. Memcha is one such young widow whose idea of a security completely changed after her husband was randomly and brutally killed by security forces.
Adubo ay nupa maran suklay na ay nupa si siri have ay pilhibi de siri ba mi puna maksing pulis na mi halam me kholam have puna maksing si hali ba mi sing ji maran suklay mo na khali maram di kay have da ay ngonda thing na rapani na ay nupa maran suklay na ay sak chamin na raga yum sida have di isa mari ga ay nuai na awan nungai gi wari chamin na raga adu sina leiram ba ay nupa do mafam dregi putu aga thongan khok da sat pakan da ay nupa siri hera amina.
This year, Indonesia is in its 15th year of reform since the fall of the Suharto dictatorship. But the AHRC notes that despite the changes that have taken place since 1998, much remains ignored by the government, hampering Indonesia's move towards full democracy. Reports of police torture and extrajudicial killings have been frequent during these reform years, including in 2013, which indicates the need for Indonesia to put more efforts into police reform. The AHRC calls for the establishment of an independent mechanism to investigate police misconduct, as well as substantial changes in police recruitment and promotion procedures. A comprehensive reform of the judiciary is also needed, as power and money regularly intervene in legal proceedings, as evidenced by the arrest of a number of judges this year. The AHRC also notes with concern that liberties in Indonesia are still restricted in some areas. Peaceful protests in Papua are still subject to forced dispersal, and religious minorities are discriminated against. This year, Indonesia also enacted a law on mass organization, which provoked criticism for violating freedom of expression. The message from Cambodia on this Human Rights Day is that the struggle in the coming year will be for social justice. We spoke with Swan Bunsak of Cambodian Human Rights Action Committee.
Currently, the Cambodian civil society organization is preparing for the celebration of Human Rights Day in this year, 2013. And the main themes that we are going to make in this year is that we call "We are all together working for the promotion and protection of social justice." This is the main theme of our Human Rights Day celebration in this year. And there are about 200 organizations working together for this celebration in this year from Cambodia.
The Rule of Law Committee of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, in a statement, condemned the recent extrajudicial killings of 4 persons by the police and Special Task Force. These killings followed the alleged murder of a policeman and his wife. It appears that the government has approved a policy of the administrative disposal of persons, which makes courts an irrelevant factor in deciding on punishment, including the use of the death sentence. There were also acts of violence by unknown persons in the north, where several opposition politicians were attacked. There were no credible inquiries into any of these attacks. Critics believe that the government was behind these attacks. The Asian Human Rights Commission stated that the problem to worry about on the Human Rights Day in Sri Lanka is that the government has taken executive control of everything and has removed any space for the judiciary and the rule of law. The use of extrajudicial violence has now become the method of ruling the country. The worst kind of human rights abuses in Pakistan are committed within the criminal justice system itself, which is deeply flawed, backlogged, and corrupt. The system is not independent, and investigators and prosecutors lack the resources, training, and security to bring about successful prosecutions. In each instance that the criminal justice system is circumvented, it grows weaker and more irrelevant, and a culture of impunity thrives. The new government showed its deep contempt for human rights immediately after assuming power by merging the Ministry of Human Rights with the Ministry of Law and Justice. The government has enacted 2 draconian laws by passing the parliament. The ordinances give unlimited powers to the law enforcement agencies to shoot suspects on sight, search houses without a warrant, confiscate property, and tap phone calls. The following statistics give a clear idea of the worsening human rights situation in Pakistan. During the 2013, 56 women were killed in Pakistan for giving birth to a girl rather than a boy. 350 women and 270 men were murdered in so-called honor killings. More than 2,000 people were tortured by state security officers. Around 2.2 million people, mostly women and children, were trapped in slavery. 450 persons were disappeared in Balochistan after their arrest by the Frontier Corps and other security forces, whereas 35 people were disappeared from Sindh province and 110 from KPK province. As reported in a previous episode, the Nepal elections were conducted successfully. The vote count for first past the post and the proportional representation system has been completed, where the Nepali Congress is in the lead, followed by the CPN-UML and the UCPN Maoists. The Election Commission has called for the parties to submit names of their candidates under the proportional representation within a week. AHRC is concerned that very few women and Dalit candidates won in the second Constituent Assembly election. The Nepali Congress, the largest party, have not nominated a single candidate from the Dalit community, although it represents over 13% of Nepal's population. The AHRC worried that less representation from women and Dalit community will jeopardize their issues in the new constitution writing process. Caste and gender-based discrimination and violence are rife across Nepal. We spoke earlier with Durga Sop, chairperson of the feminist Dalit organization, and Padam Sundas, the executive chairperson of Samata Foundation.
The human rights, the issue of Dalit in Nepal, particularly Dalit women, human rights violence is increasing rather than decreasing, because the issue, the violence against Dalit women, issue has been increasing day by day due to the continue transitional phase, and due to strong legislation in favor of Dalit and Dalit women, and whatever we have a legislation and policy, it has not been enforcement at practice. One thing. Another, the violence, particularly domestic violence cases being increased among the Dalit women, and as well as Dalit women, the case of rape and other serious violence case has been increasing in 2013.
Very less people were just got the ticket, and unfortunately, out of them also only 2 people were elected in the Constitution Assembly. Seeing all the scenario of this Constitution Assembly result, the most of the orthodox parties are the so-called so-called agitatist parties. They were elected and they got the victory, and that's why most of the Dalit people are very very eager to know whether the bills which were passed, which were not written but passed by the constitution will be taken in this new constitution or not.
World Human Rights Day is going to be celebrated in Bangladesh amidst bloody political violence. The country and its democracy are aflame in bans and blockades. The power-greedy politicians of the ruling and opposition parties are waging war against each other prior to the 10th parliamentary election. Buses are being burned, trains are getting derailed as the protesters are removing the faceplates of the railways. Crude bombs, petrol bombs are weapons of both feuding political groups. The police and paramilitary forces, including the border guards, have started massive crackdown against the pro-opposition supporters and leaders. Every day, deaths of ordinary citizens are occurring across the country. Hundreds of innocent people, including women and children, have already been victims in the ongoing violence. Many have been injured, whereas leaders and activists have been detained. People are being arrested en masse every day. The election is scheduled for January 5, 2014. The entire civil, military, and police administrations are designed and set so that Sheikh Hasina retains power in a partisan farcical election. All other opposition parties have withdrawn from the election because of the lack of a level playing field. The opposition parties demanded Sheikh Hasina to step down from the office to create an atmosphere for a credible election. While this power struggle is going on, human dignity is severely undermined and humiliated. The AHRC has requested the United Nations to intervene urgently to save the lives, livelihoods, and liberties of ordinary people in Bangladesh. In the Philippines, despite unabated torture, killings, disappearances, and reprisals on human rights and political activists, victims continue to resist by attempting to assert and protect their dignity. In Mindanao, indigenous people whose ancestral lands are arbitrarily taken away by private firms in collusion with the government are demanding what is theirs. Here is Loreto Cambo, one of the indigenous leaders in Davao del Sur, Mindanao.
ngaku ojung penawagan ko sa kauban nga lumad dili lang pud ka magsurat-surat kita iguro man ta nag-claim sa tong katungod.
To get an idea of the worsening human rights situation in Thailand, we spoke with Terrell Habercorn, senior lecturer at the Australian National University's Department of Political and Social Change.
As Human Rights Day approaches, it seems like human rights in Thailand seem incredibly fragile and uncertain, largely because after the last month, which has held a combination of a drastic transformation to the amnesty law and then nearly a month of street protests, which began as being about the amnesty law but turned into something much broader. It seems as though human rights have completely vanished. I guess to begin with the amnesty law, in the aftermath of the violence of April-May 2010, in which 92 people were killed and over 2,000 injured, the vast majority were civilians, red-shirt protesters who were killed when the state security forces cracked down in response to their protests. There were 9 different amnesty and/or reconciliation bills proposed. The form of amnesty that was selected by Parliament to move forward would have amnestied everything from 2004 up until the present. Many people were dissatisfied by this. Human rights activists were dissatisfied because it would have all of this important work that went towards holding state officials accountable for their role in 2010 would have been eliminated. The importance of the inquest would have been gone. These pending charges would have been gone. But another group of people were also very dissatisfied, and they became the largest group of people in the streets and who have been in the streets for the last month. And those were people who were against Thaksin, in a sense, the reconstituted group of people who had initially called for the coup in 2006. And what was incredibly strange about the protests is that they were a protest of this revised amnesty this revised draft amnesty bill. But they had no problem with impunity for state violence. They were upset because the amnesty bill could have, if it was passed in that form, could have also extended to the corruption cases against Thaksin. So thousands of people went out into the streets to protest this bill, but strangely unconcerned about human rights. And so it seems to me that this is an incredibly concerning moment when that could be the content of the protest.
South Korea has suffered from political deadlock this year because of serious allegations of fraud in last December's presidential election. Facts reported daily seem to be supporting allegations that government institutions, including the National Intelligence Service or NIS, interfered in the election. Initially, the government seemed successful in manipulating views that those who alleged election fraud were North Korea sympathizers, but this plot did not last. Civil society and various religious groups have started asking for NIS reform and the president's resignation. As it stands, the prosecutor's office has both investigatory and prosecutorial powers and is ultimately under the control of the presidential office. With us in the studio now, we have AHRC's Right to Food desk Avinash Pandey to talk to us about the scope of his work across Asia. Welcome to the studio. Avinash Pandey, can you please explain your colleagues' work in civil and political rights, whereas you work more within economic rights, right to food. So how does this fit into Human Rights Day?
See, there was a time when right to food and other economic, socio-cultural rights were considered to be very different from civil and political rights. And of course, civil and political rights, like the right to life and liberty, means are much more visible and they look much more urgent. But I don't really see much of a difference. For example, if you see how the right to food is being violated nowadays, after the new liberal economic policies, means governments come and they acquire lands for private property, leaving millions and millions famished and without any livelihood opportunity. How do they acquire the lands? So if you look at the structures of violations of right to food and right to other liberties like right to religion, like right to assembly, means like many of these rights are becoming, the boundaries between civil and political rights and economic socio-cultural rights are becoming very blurred. So I don't really see much of a difference, means like see in Philippines if you go, what we are witnessing in Philippines of late is massive violations of the rights to livelihood, which is an essential economic socio-cultural rights. But how do the state, how does the state do it? They do it through the police, they do it through the law enforcement agencies other than police. They do it by denying vendors access to the national parks. They evict people from their natural habitats. They displace people in the name of development projects. Similar things are happening across Asia. There are massive crackdowns again by the state. So I don't really see now much of a difference other than in justiciability.
So how do you see things unfolding in the future? Are things getting worse or are they getting better?
That's a very tricky question, but I would say that the situation we are witnessing is one of hope and despair together. So people now know their rights and they are ready to fight. Of course, the regimes have becoming more and more dictatorial and they are cracking down, but at the same time, means the protests and the mobilizations and the international world, international community supporting these rights is bringing out a situation where I really see a lot of prospect for freedoms and rights to be realized and not much to worry as of now. We don't have much to lose.
Human Rights Day was instituted by the UN General Assembly in 1950 to bring attention to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We will end this Human Rights Day edition with a message from the AHRC's Basil Fernando to highlight this special day.
On this International Human Rights Day, it is only appropriate to begin by paying tribute to the greatest human rights defender of the 20th century, Nelson Mandela, who passed away on the 5th of December. When the names of various political leaders of the 20th century are already forgotten, people will still continue to talk about this great man, Nelson Mandela. His legacy is one of total commitment to all the ideals of human rights, the equality, the liberty, the commitment to all human persons, irrespective of various gender, the race and the other factors that create discrimination, and to work towards the welfare of everybody in a spirit of truth. Such a great man is the role model that everybody should pursue in pursuit of human rights. On the December 10th, the protracted human struggle for protection of dignity of human beings will be celebrated the world over. It is perhaps the greatest celebration of the year. The dignity of the individual means the dignity of all, without discrimination on the basis of social standing, race, gender, or other divisions. Therefore, it would also be said to be the celebration of all struggle against discrimination. A great price has been paid in terms of life and liberty of literally tens of thousands of persons to defend the principles of human dignity. Much has been achieved, but there is a lot more to be achieved. In the Asian context, we see that despite the Asian governments making various declarations and even constitutional proclamations of their allegiance to the notion of human dignity and the individual rights, there is yet a very scant regard for the actual realization of this goal. In the civil and the political rights sphere, the right to life has been flouted scandalously by way of extrajudicial killings, including forced disappearances. Torture and ill treatment are widespread in the region, and violators enjoy immunity. Illegal arrest and detention are also widespread, and quite often there are no legal proceedings adequate enough to protect these rights. On the other hand, even when the law exists in the books, there is hardly any implementation. Also, fair trial is flouted by thousand means, and the access to justice remains a dream for almost everybody. There are also violations of freedom of speech, the freedom of publication, and freedom of association, and many defenders of these rights have a heavy price to pay. On the area of discrimination, the women in almost all Asian countries have made only a slight progress, and many brutal forms of violations are reported in almost on daily basis. There are many minorities who still suffer serious forms of suppression. Among them, there should be special mention of Dalits and low caste people, indigenous people, and racial and other ethnic minorities. In the area of economic, social, and cultural rights, the individual is often sacrificed for various ideologies such as development, economic progress, and the like. The burdens of economic life are always passed on to the poor. It is within this overall context that people celebrate the fight for human dignity and individual rights. Massive struggles are present all over, where humble individuals struggle hard to improve their lot and to have their dignity respected.
That is all for this week's Human Rights Asia Weekly Roundup. For more information on these issues, log on to www.humanrights.asia. Thank you for watching and hope to see you again next week.